It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from number 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister has tonight called a general election.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future.
The date is set. Rishi Sunak calling the election for July the 4th. And now for the campaign as politicians try to win your votes.
On the 4th of July, you have the choice. And together, we can stop the chaos, we can turn the page, we can start to rebuild Britain and change our country.
The Prime Minister promises to fight to earn the trust of the voter. We'll be in one of the target towns to find out what people want from the government.
We're all as bad as each other. You're not getting truth from either side.
And inflation falls to its lowest point in nearly 3 years, but not as low as predicted by economists to bring down interest rates. Also tonight, the former Post Office Chief Executive, Paula Venables, breaks down while giving evidence at the inquiry, as she admits making mistakes.
I fully accept now that the Post Office,
And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening, live from Downing Street, where just a few hours ago the Prime Minister announced that now is the moment for Britain to choose its future. Rishi Sunak announcing a summer general election, naming the date for the nation to go to the polls on the 4th of July. It's a moment people here in Westminster have long waited for, but it did not come without disquiet from some of those here in Westminster as he made that announcement on the steps of number 10 in the rain. Well, campaigning will officially begin next week on the 31st of May as politicians go up and down the UK fighting for your votes. So just 42 days then, 8 hours and 58 minutes to go before the polls open. And on Sky News at 10, we'll bring you the views from all 4 nations of the UK and answer the most pressing question, why now? But now our first report is from our political editor, Beth Rigby, as the Prime Minister calls a general election.
After weeks of discussions in Downing Street and rumours flying around Westminster, now we know.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
This a finely balanced decision, the PM picking a summer campaign and trying to find bright spots even as he stood under grey skies drenched by the rain.
Our economy is now growing faster than anyone predicted, outpacing Germany, France and the United States. And this morning it was confirmed that inflation is back to normal. This means that the pressure on prices will ease and mortgage rates will come down. This is proof that the plan and priorities I set out are working.
This an election that will be fought on the economy. The PM thinks he has a story to sell and an opponent ripe for attack.
On the 5th of July, either Keir Starmer or I will be Prime Minister. He has shown time and time again that he will take the easy way out and do anything to get power.
This man making a bid to hold onto it, but with a nod to mistakes made as he asks voters to give him another chance.
Now, I cannot and will not claim that we have got everything right. No government should. But I am proud of what we have achieved together, the bold actions we have taken, and I'm confident about what we can do in the future.
But the optics of this election launch unideal as the Prime Minister's pitch risks being drowned out by the weather. Within the hour, Labour ready to respond, presenting their leader as a Prime Minister in waiting, flanked by flags and ready for the race.
A chance to change for the better. Your future, your community, your country. Now, it will feel like a long campaign, I'm sure of that. But no matter what else is said and done, that opportunity for change is what this election is about. A vote for Labour is a vote for stability, economic and political, a politics that treads more lightly on all our lives, a vote to stop the chaos.
This is set to be a history-making election, whichever way it goes. If Keir Starmer wins an outright majority, it will be the biggest ever uniform swing from one party to another in UK election history. And if Sunak is victorious, well, no Prime Minister has ever come back from a 20-point deficit in the polls weeks away from a general election. Either way, July the 4th is going to be a record-breaking battle for number 10.
It's time for change.
Labour out of the blocks with this pre-cooked campaign video put out while the Prime Minister was still at the podium. And this evening, Rishi Sunak dried off with his sleeves rolled up and his election pitch. Clear action, bold plan, secure future.
Labour want you to think that this election is over before it has even begun. But we are going to fight. We are going to fight every day for our values and our vision. And the British people are going to show Labour that they don't take too kindly to being taken for granted.
For the next 6 weeks, you'll be seeing and hearing a lot more of this. This man, the clear underdog, but there's a lot of campaign to go, and both parties are spoiling for the fight.
Well, tonight, Beth is here with me in Downing Street. Lisa Dowd is in Cardiff. Sajid Chowdhury is in Edinburgh. And our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, is at Stormont in Belfast. We'll be coming to all of them in a moment. But first, let's head to you, Beth, here in Downing Street. What a day. And certainly shock from Rishi Sunak's own MPs at this news. But what are you hearing from Downing Street this evening?
A couple of things, Anna. Just on the shock from MPs, this really did come left field. Spoken to a couple of former cabinet ministers tonight, both of them saying they think it is madness, they're so far behind in the polls, upset that he is calling the election now. There was a sense that after the local elections, when there was no obvious leadership challenge, that Rishi Sunak had ridden that out and they were going to wait till the autumn. Why did they take the decision now? That's the question. Look, I've been told that it was a finely balanced decision, that it had been under discussion for weeks, that he had taken counsel and advice from a number of people in government, and in the end it was the Prime Minister's decision and his decision alone. As I understand it from sources around Whitehall, Isaac Levido, his campaign chief, I understand, was wanting to go long, wanting for an autumn election. Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, I'm told, wanted to go sooner. One source in Downing Street told me tonight that they thought that Michael Gove in Cabinet summed it up the best today when he spoke of the Prime Minister's approach. Michael Gove apparently saying in Cabinet, who dares wins, and you dared and you're going to win. And I think the point as well in terms of the calculation now was that there was a hope that the bright spots in the economy would feed through to how voters are feeling into the autumn. I think that has faded away, and I think it's partly because as inflation has come down and wages have been going up for the past 10 or so months, that people are still not feeling better off. So there was a calculation, I think, where they thought, well, if we go in July or we go in November, will that materially change? So they've decided to go early. I have to say, from a Labour point of view, they are absolutely delighted by this tonight. They're 20 points ahead. They didn't want to go on and on for months. They were worried that all it would do would close the gap for Starmer, and now they've got that election that they have been calling for months. It's a huge gamble. Rishi Sunak genuinely thinks that he can make the argument to the country, but I have to say, Anna, he's been going at this for nearly 2 years, and the polls have not shifted yet in his favour.
It's truly fascinating, isn't it, Beth? For the moment, thank you very much indeed. So let's take a look then at what the parties need to win in the upcoming general election. Well, the Conservatives won a majority of 80 seats in 2019, but boundary changes since then have changed the starting position. Based on these new estimates, on the 4th of July, the Conservatives will defend 372 seats and a majority of 94. If the whole country behaved in a uniform way, then a swing of 4.2 from Conservative to Labour would wipe out that Tory majority. A swing of 8.3 percentage points would see Labour overtake the Conservatives to become the largest party in a hung parliament. That is higher than Margaret Thatcher achieved in the 1979 win that first put her in power. Of course, if Labour does particularly well in Scotland, gaining several seats from the SNP, or overperforms in certain target constituencies, then that headline swing might not be needed, which might be welcome for Sir Keir Starmer, as the uniform swing to gain the 125 seats that would take Labour to the magic number of 326 required for a majority is a record-breaking 12.7, higher than the 10.2 that Tony Blair achieved for his 1997 landslide. If there was a uniform swing of 12.7, then one of the seats that would fall along the way is Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes. Sky's People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin reports from our target town of Grimsby.
It's a fantastic little local family-run business, and we sell everything.
Carl Vince shows me around his auction house. It's a treasure trove of items he says appeals to every taste. His politics are similar. Sometimes he votes Labour, other times Conservative. It just depends on what catches his eye. We're about to watch the Prime Minister set out his big sell to the nation.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future.
Well, what did you think of that?
Interesting. Independence Day. 4th of July. It's very soon.
So you're not convinced about Rishi Sunak?
No.
So does that mean you are convinced about Labour and Keir Starmer?
No, I'm as equally unconvinced on both.
Well, I am going to press you on to try and figure out who you might vote for. You know, in auctioneer terms, the sale's begun. When the election gavel falls, come on, tell me who your gut feeling is, who you'll vote for on the day.
I honestly haven't got one.
Right.
It's the first time ever since I've been a voter that I can't choose.
The electoral battle here in Grimsby and Cleethorpes could be fierce. Labour will need a nearly 12-point swing to win this newly merged constituency back from the Conservatives. So voters now have 6 weeks to decide who to vote for. Now, for some, it's going to be clear-cut. But for others, issues surrounding trust, policy, the personality of politicians will mean this election and their vote in it will be full of difficult decisions. Jake Ollerton's 26, a civil servant. He still hasn't made up his mind.
I don't always agree with a lot of the Labour views, but at the moment, under Conservative Parliament, it's not working, it's not working.
Harry Smith and his wife Jerry are also disillusioned voters.
I know who I'm voting for. I'm voting for Reform UK. Not necessarily because I believe they're going to be any different to the others, but if you've always done what if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
You've got to give someone else a chance, you know. You've got to give someone else a chance if you're not happy with what you've got.
All the parties have a job on their hands, winning over these undecided voters in marginal seats like this one. They are the battlegrounds of this election. Nick Martin, Sky News, Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes.
So many people asking tonight, why now? Why has the Prime Minister decided to call a general election while being behind in the polls for this summer? Well, today, inflation fell sharply to 2.3%, meaning the rate of price rises has dropped to the lowest point in nearly 3 years, albeit not as low as economists had predicted. In a moment, we'll get the economic analysis of our economics editor, Ed Conway, at the screen. But first, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has been looking at the election pledges and why the Prime Minister has called it now.
A Prime Minister well behind in the polls, choosing to call an election before he had to. All of Westminster asking the same question. Why now? To answer that, you need to go back in time. To January of last year, Rishi Sunak setting out his 5 pledges to the nation.
I will only promise what I can deliver, and I will deliver what I promise.
5 promises on the economy, the NHS and immigration, the themes to win voters back to his beleaguered party. Today, the PM gambling that he can claim enough of the progress he needs. Recent good economic news, the real driver behind his decision. A morning announcement that inflation is finally back to normal levels, seized on across government as evidence their plan is working.
We are back to target, back to a time before the international crises of COVID, of the war in Ukraine.
We're not back. We're 20% higher than we were in 2021.
No. Well, inflation is back to 2.3%, which is near target. And so we're back to that sort of normality.
On immigration, plans are in place for flights to take off to Rwanda this summer. But a July election means we won't know if the boats have actually been stopped. It's a window of opportunity that Rishi Sunak has chosen to seize, but his party isn't convinced.
Tory MPs are far from happy at the election decision, believing that Rishi Sunak has put his interests over theirs. They know that they are marching towards the sound of machine gun fire, but have no option but to put their fate in his hands.
There'll always be people who say he should have waited a bit longer, or some will still say he should have gone in May when we had the local elections. This is the date he's picked, and all of this will be swept aside now. Colleagues over the next few days will be returning to their constituencies, writing their election literature, getting their campaign grid up, and actually they will be working 150% for the next 42 days to be returned in their seat.
Thousands of miles away, the devastation in Gaza is an issue for voters here too. Recent elections have shown pro-Palestinian independence eating into Labour's vote. Ministers think that scenes like George Galloway's shocked Rochdale win could repeat in the general election too. Labour watching closely.
We are fighting for every single vote in this general election. We take no vote and no community in any part of our country for granted. This general election is a chance to change the government of our country, and the Labour Party has a plan to change our country.
The Prime Minister is gambling his office on persuading the nation they can't afford change. Keir Starmer hoping caution and reassurance enough to get him through the door to number 10. Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, the Prime Minister made the economy one of the central battlegrounds for this election campaign. We got this assessment from our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
It's the economy, stupid, or so goes the adage about elections. They're decided by the economy. In some ways, was this one, the calling of it, decided by the economy? Maybe because the Prime Minister was talking about this when he made his speech. The consumer price index inflation, it has been one of the biggest stories economically recently. It was down low before the cost of living crisis, the rate at which those prices rise, close to the Bank of England's target. Then it went up in that rollercoaster fashion up to over 10%. And now it is down, look at that, down to 2.3% in April. That's the lowest it's been since the beginning of that crisis. And the Prime Minister will want to hope that's normality coming back. The slight problem for him is, while that's certainly good news, it wasn't quite as low as many economists had expected. And the upshot of that is, it may not be that the Bank of England can start cutting interest rates quite as quickly as he would hope. Before those numbers were released, there was a 50% chance, this is looking at the market-based probability of a rate cut in June, in other words, before the election. There was a 50% chance of it before those numbers came through. Then, look, the numbers came through, and that went down to 12%. So it doesn't look like interest rates are going to be cut before this election, at least according to that. However, the other news is certainly better. So the UK is out of that recession. This is showing you GDP, gross domestic product, is rising, rising, rising. It fell for 2 quarters. That was the recession. And then look what happened in the latest quarter. 0.6% growth. That was one of the fastest growth rates we've seen in the G7. So certainly good news there. But there's less good news when you look at the broader picture here. And that broader picture, you know, when you talk about it's the economy, stupid, there's always that question, do you feel better off now than you were at the start of this parliament? Well, for most parliaments, going back to the 1950s, that certainly was the case. People got better off. These bars went up. Household disposable income increased. But look at what happened, or what's due to happen in this parliament. Look at this bar here. That is the only time in modern history that you've seen real household disposable income falling over the course of the parliament. And that's going to be very difficult for Rishi Sunak to contend with. Even so, there's going to be many other issues that come up. For instance, the tax burden. The Chancellor says that he wants to get tax burden falling. In reality, over the course of this Parliament, it's risen up to the highest level since 1949. Now, he's going to say it's partly down to the pandemic, it's down to the energy crisis. But even so, this is a big issue that many people are filling in their pockets on top of everything else, and that's due to go higher. So we're going to learn more about the government's plans for that. We're going to learn more about their plans for the fiscal policy, and hopefully we'll learn something about what Labour stand for as well, which means it's going to be quite a fascinating period during this election.
Ed Conway there. Well, let's bring in our correspondents in Edinburgh, Belfast and Cardiff now. Sky's Sajid Chowdhury joins us from Edinburgh. Turbulent times for the SNP there recently, Sajid, and a result, of course, which could be critical for any Labour victory.
Yeah, you can look at Scotland like one big swing state for Labour. How people vote here could have a massive impact on the overall election results. And as you say, for Labour, which is down to just one seat after the 2019 elections, they will be hoping to massively campaign here in Scotland. They've identified 28 seats which are potentially in play, as has been reported. And why do they feel so confident? Well, that's because, as you say, the SNP not what it used to be, with allegations of embezzlement, infighting in the party, and a revolving door of leaders. But also a by-election result last October, which went against the SNP and towards Labour. To Labour, that's also been a positive sign. And just this week, a YouGov poll, which put Scottish Labour 10 points ahead of the SNP.
Well, let's go to Belfast and speak to our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins. And a fascinating battle there too, David, with eyes on how many seats Sinn Féin will win, despite not sending its MPs to Westminster.
That's right, Anna. I think a very real potential for Sinn Féin to become the largest Northern Ireland party at Westminster. That would be significant given that its MPs are elected on the basis that they will not take their seats in the British Parliament. In that scenario, Northern Ireland could have more empty than occupied seats in the Commons. What would that say about the relationship between this place and the rest of the UK? As for the largest unionist party, the DUP, well, it wasn't very long ago that they found themselves unexpectedly holding the balance of power at Westminster, but at least 3 of the party's 8 seats are deemed marginal, including Lagan Valley, of course, the constituency held for the last 27 years by their former leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. He's facing historical sex charges, won't run this time. Can they hold that seat without him? And of course, the other big question is the potential impact on the newly restored power-sharing government here at Stormont. Relationships have been good for 4 months, but parties tend to retreat to the trenches during an election campaign.
And Lisa Dowd is outside the Welsh Assembly building in Cardiff for us. And tough times for the incumbent Labour Party there too, Lisa, with another collapsing cooperation deal.
Well, the election perhaps couldn't come at a better time for Welsh Labour, who are in power here. Their relatively new First Minister, Vaughan Gethin, has had a challenging few weeks. A controversy surrounding a £200,000 donation to his leadership campaign. He's had to sack a junior minister, allegedly for leaking information to the media, and also the collapse of this cooperation agreement with the Welsh nationalist Plaid Cymru. So he'd be delighted that the focus has shifted to Westminster. He's already put out a video saying that a Labour government would work better with his Labour Party here in Wales. But at Prime Minister questions, Rishi Sunak often mentions Labour's record here in Wales, particularly the very long NHS waiting lists. Locally, the Tories here also very critical of the default 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that is in position here. They say Labour's record in Wales should be a stark warning to the rest of the UK. Plaid Cymru are saying they are the only party that will put Wales first. A similar message from the Lib Dems here in Wales as well. People will be voting for 32 MPs here, down from 40 due to boundary changes.
Sajid, David and Lisa, thanks to all of you. Well, further reflections on the upcoming election to come later in the programme, but to the Post Office inquiry now. And Paula Venables, the former boss of the Post Office, has given evidence to the public inquiry into the Horizon IT failures. It is the first time in almost a decade Ms Venables has spoken publicly about what happened. She apologised and admitted she made mistakes, at times becoming emotional. Sky's business correspondent Adele Robinson has more.
Will you take responsibility for this?
It's the ultimate question.
Did you cover this up?
To the woman who's been silent for nearly a decade.
Will you be accountable for this, Mrs Venables?
Miss Venables.
Paula Venables oversaw the most widespread miscarriage of justice Britain's ever seen.
Nothing but the truth. Thank you.
A chance now to defend the decisions she made as chief executive of the Post Office.
How sorry I am for all that sub-postmasters and their families and others have suffered.
At the start of her long-awaited evidence, Jason Beer KC took his first shot.
Do you think you're the unluckiest CEO in the United Kingdom?
I was too trusting.
And then tears several times throughout.
I fully accept now that the Post Office, I imagine that, I'm sorry, I imagine that I was probably...
Ms Venables, just rather than trying to talk through your...
I beg your pardon.
Just pause.
Yes, OK.
Try and compose yourself if you can, and then continue your evidence, please.
Paula Venables is also shown a damning text from the ex-Royal Mail boss, Moya Green.
I think you knew, Moya. You reply, no, Moya, that isn't the case. She replies, I want to believe you. You don't answer the question, how could you not have known?
It's a question I have asked myself as well.
Paula Venables' defence is that she was let down by others but should have dug deeper, insisting there was no intentional withholding of evidence. In other words, no cover-up, no conspiracy. Lead campaigner for sub-postmasters Alan Bates, however, gives his verdict.
It's good to see her actually on the stand for once and made a change for so many of the victims that have suffered over the years. I've got no sympathy there.
Paula Venables will return for a second day with more at stake than just the truth, accountability. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Well, Sky News spent the day in Fenny Compton in Warwickshire with sub-postmasters and their families, many of whom have waited for years to see her face questions over what she knew and when. Sky's national correspondent Tom Parmenter reports from there.
The fight back started right here 15 years ago. The village hall in the heart of Middle England. And so they assembled again to listen to the woman who ran the post office that did so much damage. She apologised, but it wasn't enough.
I can't accept it. I mean, she's ruined all our lives, 20 years of hell.
I spoke to the father who explained to me that there were other issues involved.
In here, as they watched the tears from Paula Venables, they were unconvinced.
I think they will get through to the truth, but I don't know whether Paula is prepared to tell the truth.
Damien from North Wales missed his child's first birthday because he was wrongly imprisoned.
This is a joke, and I think it's a waste of time having her there because she's not going to give frank and honest answers. Everything's someone else's fault.
There were moments when anger turned to ridicule.
Do you think you're the unluckiest CEO in the United Kingdom?
But this community, who've supported each other through their darkest days, were angry too. Varchas was here on behalf of his father, who is now in very poor health.
The harm on my father, the catastrophic harm, has been brought on by his wrongful prosecution.
Vipin Patel's family from Oxfordshire have been through hell.
To my horror, which my father only revealed to me last year, that some individuals built a 4 to 6 foot cross, put a wreath on it and put "Rest in Peace Vipin." And for years this sort of torment went on. It took me a while to digest, but I am very, very angry.
Nothing that Paula Venables has said so far has quelled that anger. But they are starting to see accountability after setting out on this path here all those years ago. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Fenny Compton.
The Conservative MP Craig McKinley has returned to Parliament for the first time since having both hands and feet amputated after contracting sepsis last year.
Can I ask the Prime Minister, there is a question here. Prime Minister, can we please ensure that we embed recognition of early signs of sepsis? It wouldn't have worked for me, mine was too quick and too sudden. But for many people, they do get a few days. If we can stop somebody ending up like this, I would say that's a job well done.
Well, the MP for South Thanet was put into a coma when the infection took hold. His wife was told he had a 5% chance of survival. He met the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, ahead of Prime Minister's questions, before receiving a standing ovation from the House. Ireland's coalition government has joined Norway and Spain in recognising the state of Palestine. The three countries say they've done it in support of peace, not Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the decision as a reward for terrorism and ordered ambassadors in Ireland and Norway to return home immediately. A person has died after a mudslide on the edge of the North York Moors. It's as a yellow rain warning has been issued for the north of England, the Midlands and north and central Wales until early tomorrow morning. 6 British passengers remain in a critical condition after being on board a Singapore Airlines flight, which encountered severe turbulence and descended 6,000 feet in 3 minutes. Singapore Airlines have apologised for a traumatic flight. One British man died in the incident. Sky's Cordelia Lynch has been speaking to some of the survivors.
The hugs of survivors with the families they feared they might not see again. Some of the passengers of SQ321, fresh from a horrifying ordeal.
Obviously, just relieved at this point because it was a very, very obviously a traumatic experience. It's hard to really describe in words. No one expects that.
Josh Silverstone was taken to hospital after being thrown out of his seat.
There was a huge bang, and I remember kind of waking up on the floor and just, listening to, like people crying. Looking around, you're seeing blood, you're seeing the ceilings falling through and things like that, it was pretty alarming. After that, I suddenly could barely walk, and I started throwing up a lot, and they took me to the hospital, took me here.
Amazingly, in the chaos, he managed to get Wi-Fi to message his mum.
I didn't want to be too alarming, and I didn't want to scare myself, so I just felt that I'll contact her. I think I messaged her something like, on a bit of a crazy flight, having an emergency landing, but love you all.
She is naturally now desperate to be with him.
I do want to come out and fly over to make sure you're okay.
You're not flying out, but I will fly out to you when my holiday is done, and you will see me in a couple of weeks. Yeah, you can wait.
At some point, it will all come to him just how close he came to death or even serious injury.
We now know the flight from London to Singapore hit extreme turbulence, causing a sudden jump and drop. The pilot forced to make an emergency landing in Bangkok. Sadly, one man didn't make it. 73-year-old Jeff Kitchen died of a suspected heart attack, beloved by his local theatre group.
He was a lovely man, just one of the best human beings you could ever know, really lovely. He was kind, he was fun, he was really, really reliable and sensible.
Singapore Airlines have apologised for the traumatic flight, one that's left 6 British passengers in a critical condition. A rare event that will likely take a very long time to process. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Bangkok, Thailand.
Well, let's get back to the general election announcement now. Beth Rigby is here with us once again. We're about to look at the front pages, obviously, but plenty will be made about the optics of today, not least here at number 10, but also for Sir Keir Starmer.
It really was a surprise, Anna, in that the Prime Minister came out in the driving rain. He got absolutely soaked, and you saw him walking back in, just drenched by the rain. I had thought that he might perhaps do it inside because of the rain. I asked someone in his team, they said that this country is about tradition, and he was determined to do it outside, come rain or shine. The problem is with the optics is when you're trying to talk about bright points of the economy and so on, in the gloomy weather with torrential rain and getting soaked, it's not the optics that you might want to start your campaign with. And added to that was the noise, which wasn't picked up in my TV report. We couldn't really hear it on those cameras. But when we were live, what you could hear was "Things Can Only Get Better," Blair's 1997 theme tune to that election. And I wonder, because I was here, I think it might have put him off a bit. It was so loud. Compare and contrast to Keir Starmer, inside with the flags, the backdrop with the panelling looked like he was actually in the Prime Minister's press conference room. It looked like the media room where Prime Ministers hold press conferences. In terms of what Labour are feeling tonight, I messaged one of them and said, "Is the timing good for you?" They said it's great for the country, and their message is change. And one of them messaged me just before Starmer stood up, and he said, "What you're going to see on our lecterns is the word change. That's our election message." Now, Rishi Sunak will argue they haven't got a plan. Keir Starmer will say, yes, we do, and he will roll out his 6 first steps. But in reality, I think Labour have taken the decision that the country wants change, and they believe that that change message is enough to carry Starmer over the line. We've talked about it all night, haven't we? It will be a record breaker. That 12.7% uniform swing that is required to win an outright majority has to do better than Blair in 97. If he gets it, it will be record break-in. So I think we'll be talking about that, of course. We're also going to be talking, I'm sure, in the coming weeks about possible deals, tie-ups, what if he becomes the largest party and doesn't win an outright majority. Last week I asked him about tie-ups. He would not, again, rule out a deal with the Lib Dems, but did with the SNP. So I think that that will be a sub-theme, certainly, in this general election.
Well, Beth, before we let you go and take a look at some of those newspapers and their reaction, let's just show you at home what we can expect here at Sky News.
The end of this gripping Premier League season, making it 7 straight wins.
When's Kay coming in?
I think they're going to kick off when she gets here.
You think of their defenders, you think of Carlos just over 6 foot away.
And our match commentators.
Right, let's see what this election studio is all about then.
Lost the crowd.
Hiya. All right, mate.
How are you, Kay?
I'm good.
Sorry?
Come on, we've not got all night. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
Don't say no to this one.
Is this a prank? Is that Beatles about or something?
Yeah. Kay's about.
Look, Ed's already measuring up the screens.
Well, this is fantastic. We're going to have maps there, charts there, and more data over there.
As they feel the pressure, you've got to go tight in.
Where's Sophie?
Enough Fergie time. Time for election time, I think you're fine. You can both... This is my studio.
We're gone as well.
Gone.
Oh, God.
See ya.
You're fired.
Oh,
I'm not joking.
To be, I've always wanted to take you on live, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, he's all mouth.
Yeah, I reckon we can work with this.
This place will be our home on Election Night Live, and we'll be ready to bring you the full story first, here on Sky News.
Nice to meet you.
You too, my darling. I'm coming this way first.
Hey, okay. Oh, yeah, she knows.
You're going there first.
See ya, thanks. Much better.
So tonight we are joined by Lucy Fisher, Whitehall editor of the Financial Times, and Kevin Maguire, associate editor at the Daily Mirror. Welcome to all of you. Beth, first of all, you know, we've taken a look at what Sky News is going to offer. Schedules are being cleared left, right and centre, aren't they?
Well, fortunately, the Premier League has just come to an end, so we've nicked the Monday Night Football studio and we've kicked them all out, which was very enjoyable. So we're going to be hosting our election night in that studio. It'll be Kay Burley and I all night. We're going to have Trevor Phillips there and a couple of special guests. Then Sophie and Sam will be picking up in the morning, and of course we're going to have Ed Conway with all those screens. So Gary Neville is gone. It's Kay Burley now. For one season only.
One season
yeah,
only,
so it's quite good timing, really. So yeah, we've got Monday Night Football studio, and I have to say it is sick. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
It's after the watershed.
Back of the net.
Yeah, back of the net. Honestly, I mean, I've got quite into football in recent years, so it was like it's a perfect mashup for me.
In the meantime, Lucy and Kevin, let's talk about today, shall we? And how big a shock it was for both of you that actually it's going to be a summer election after all that.
Well, I've got to give a plug to the FT the
you
weekend.
Got wind of this, didn't you? Right, Lucy got a little sniffle on this.
Straws in the wind. So we heard that on Monday of last week, party bosses at CCHQ, Conservative Campaign Headquarters, cleared the decks to talk about the finances of a potential July election. They gave the instruction to key pen holders, the people in the party with a relationship with mega donors, to make discreet inquiries about big donations. So that was one of the sort of hints. However, I think it did come as a big shock today, not least to Rishi Sunak's cabinet, who were kept in the dark to the last hour. David Cameron having to dash back from Albania. Grant Shapps, Defence Secretary, having to delay a visit to the Baltics, to come to this briefing at 4 p.m. shortly before Sunak came out here and addressed us all in that pouring rain.
Kevin.
Well, it is a shock because it only makes sense if you think life is going to get worse. And of course, the whole argument from the Prime Minister and those around him had been, well, you go on, you'll get some people strapped into seats and planes to Rwanda, the economy will recover, inflation will come down again, there'll be some interest rate cuts, people will feel the benefits of wages going up more than inflation, national insurance cuts, so you play it long. Clearly, they've decided if they play it long, it's going to get worse. And so that is the shock when you look at it, because he's staring down a barrel, isn't he? I mean, that is his gamble. And what a chaotic launch when the D-Ream coming through. Watching live, it was really loud. But then the rain and getting soaked, you look like a drowned rat.
Yeah, well, there might be feel-good factor of the Euros. I hate to bring it back to football. We're going to take a look at the papers then. Let's see what the front pages are doing with this, whether there's that seismic moment when papers are calling it, who they support. Let's find out. So the Metro leading with Rishi Sunak's announcement of a summer election, calling it a bombshell. The Financial Times describes the Prime Minister as abandoning hope for better economic news. The Mail calls the Prime Minister's announcement a big gamble, considering that he's 20 points behind Labour in opinion polls. The Guardian leading with a similar headline. The Eye reporting that Sunak's gamble is an attempt to catch Labour off guard, while the Times reports on his decision to call a general election marking a pivotal moment for Britain's future. And the Mirror features a rain-soaked Rishi Sunak, dubbing the Prime Minister as drown and out. And the Telegraph's headline, things can only get wetter. Something I know you tweeted earlier, Kevin. Well, a quick reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for yourself. In the meantime, let's talk more. There's so much to discuss, isn't there? Lucy Fisher, Kevin Maguire are here. Saw your paper there, the idea that things will get worse, not that things can only get better, that we heard here. Is that what drove Rishi Sunak to decide it, if it was so finely balanced even today?
I think that's right. We understand that Rishi Sunak, in discussions with the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, were concerned that the economic picture would not necessarily brighten as much as they had hoped by the autumn, that interest rate cuts from the Bank of England might happen later than expected, so that voters wouldn't feel the benefit of it by the time of October, November. And on top of that, Jeremy Hunt's made all these hints about potentially cutting taxes again if there was, a fiscal statement in the autumn. We understand from senior government officials that actually they came to the conclusion there won't necessarily be the fiscal headroom for those tax cuts. So perhaps better for the party to go now for a general election, I imagine there'll be tax cuts promised in the manifesto, rather than have to wait to the autumn and let down, the public who they'd hinted that to, and Tory MPs who'd really been banking on that as a sweetener.
Well, we see the Times there, Sunak bets the House.
Yeah.
I mean, this really does feel like a gamble, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. It's a very good picture on the front of the Times, number 10 behind, literally betting the House. They'll say it's an enormous gamble, have John Curtis, one of Britain's preeminent pollsters, because they're 25 points behind, he says there. They also have Isaac Levido, the campaign chief, saying go long, don't go short. A lot of advice for him not to do it, and Labour MPs are incredibly happy because they thought they'd have to go through the summer and you get worried, you almost got the prize, you haven't quite got it, the longer it goes on it might slip away. While Tory MPs, a lot of them are going around, why has he done this? Yeah. Some of them will lose 4, 5, 6 months pay, of course, because he could have gone as late as December, that they'll be off. And so if he's made his decision, but he's perplexed and baffled his own party and he's delighted the main opposition.
The Daily Mail as well, now is the moment for Britain to choose its future. At this time, we wait to see, who the papers are going to back. The famous moment when The Sun decided to call it for Tony Blair back in 1997. Do you sense any shift? Will there be any corrections of the newspapers? Or are they still going to back winners, which is what Rupert Murdoch always famously said he did?
Yeah, they wait. But the Sun very recently...
You think they do that the night before the election, then?
Well, the last poll I saw, the majority of their readers were voting Labour. So in a way, often a paper has to follow its readers rather than taking the leaders with them. They had a very favourable interview, 2 pages with Wes Streeton, then had a piece by Wes Streeton. Then this morning they had a piece by Rachel Reeves attacking the government. So I think the Sun might be making up its mind. It's got a long history with Keir Starmer, because he was the DPP when some journalists were being prosecuted, although all the evidence was handed over by Rupert Murdoch himself, who was a supergrass. He wanted to keep the company out of the court, so he sacrificed this up. But the Mail is very interesting because that is not tub-thumping for the Tories today. I've no doubt come 4th of July they will back them, but they can see all the problems, and they point out, they quote a senior Tory saying it's a suicidal move. Then they have Esther McVey, the common sense or so-called common sense minister, saying, you've got to wait to allow people to feel the benefits of money in their pockets. And he hasn't done that, Sunak.
Fascinating. Well, quite a contrast from when Jeremy Corbyn was there as the Labour leader and what the Daily Mail did at that point, certainly. Let's take a look at your paper. The economy taking central stage for the Conservatives' campaign. Obviously, inflation coming down. He called it normal today, actually, even though it was slightly higher than economists had predicted and perhaps has an impact on interest rates. Is it about the economy, do you think, for people now? Or have they tuned out of the Conservative offering?
No, I think it is. The economy will be the main backdrop to this election, as it is to every election. I think we shouldn't, lose sight of the fact that inflation today has got down to a 3-year low. It wasn't quite as close to the target threshold of 2% as perhaps Sunak would have hoped, but, not far off at 2.3%. And I think there is this sort of the argument that's been put to Sunak that he found compelling was that there is this runway now to sort of launch the election campaign with inflation coming down, with the economic data earlier this month showing that the country is out of a technical recession, is now growing again. And of course, the other big theme that I think we'll be hearing a lot more about in coming weeks is immigration. And he's finally got his flagship Rwanda deportation policy into law. We could potentially expect to see some flights removing asylum seekers to Kigali just before polling day, which could be great headlines and pictures for him and for those who want a hardline crackdown on illegal immigration. And of course, the counterfactual, if he'd waited till the autumn, potentially we would have had great weather over the summer and we could have seen record numbers crossing the channel in small boats and leading to quite negative headlines for him.
I think before immigration, probably after the economy, is public services. And the state of public services, particularly the NHS, which is ailing near record, waiting lists, criminal justice system that seems to be falling apart. The Times had the story today, police have been told to arrest fewer people. And I think that really hurts the Conservatives because it's always been a core issue for them to say they were tough on law and order. And people just feel so much, and Starmer exploits this and goes on about it endlessly, that nothing works in Britain. And I think that will strike home with a lot of people. You're paying more tax, record rate of tax, you haven't got as much money in your pocket, and yet the public services aren't performing as well as you want.
Yeah, you always wonder if Rishi Sunak will rue the day that he didn't actually sort out striking health workers earlier as part of that. Your paper, The Mirror, drowning out, things can only get wetter. It's all there, isn't it? But we heard from Beth Rigby. He's a stickler for tradition. It is traditional to announce an election just outside, steps away from where we are now.
Yeah, well, he's going to pay a price for it. See, look at that image. No one's going to have great confidence in him looking that way. I agree. I watched the coverage of the rally, small Conservative Party rally later. He looked a lot better in that, although I thought the image there, Darren McCaffrey, the Sky reporter, and the camera crew being pushed out by two heavies and the lens being covered, I thought that is not good. It's an election. You want to connect with people. Where's the transparency? Where's the accountability? But I think, right, tradition, well, that's all well and good. But check the weather first. See what time you're going to come out and have an umbrella if you need one.
This is it. I was going to say, I saw a great picture today of Barack Obama, holding a brolly, actually managing to make it look quite cool with the rain pouring down. And I think it was a mistake for Sunak to come out without any covering. He could have had an aide holding an umbrella. He could have held it himself. There were other options. But, the pathetic fallacy, it just lent itself to all sorts of ominous metaphors about the storm clouds looming, about his gloomy message,
I've all had too much fun already.
We've had too much fun.
Kill
satire, as we were saying.
The math cartoon on the front of the Telegraph is a Tory canvasser knocking on the door saying we're raising money to buy the Prime Minister an overcoat.
In the meantime, a more favourable picture, you might say, on the front of The Guardian, but a very similar headline to the Telegraph, both going on this idea of this being an enormous gamble. It's like turkeys voting for Christmas, going before you have to. And everybody's asking the question, why, including his own party. And it's going to be hard to escape from that question, isn't it?
Well, I think that's right. And, I've spoken to some MPs today, Tory MPs, who are furious about this decision. For the reasons that Kevin outlined, they may see them, lose their seats, lose their income sooner. And just thinking that, Rishi Sunak once said to me, he owns a ranch in California. I don't have that. There will be people turning to kind of the options that Sunak have, whereas they might be left out on their ear. So I think in the days ahead, we might hear more about the repercussions from some of his own backbenchers.
Nobody likes a reckless gambler. Nobody likes a gambler who loses. And there is this feeling he's being a little bit fly on this, a little bit reckless.
Well, even Nadine Dorries talking about, when US schools start and, suggesting he's going to plan to head to California as part of the reason. Not surprising Rishi Sunak is dominating the front pages, but let's talk about elsewhere. Labour as well, change behind Sir Keir Starmer with the Union flag, looking prime ministerial, many have said. But other parties as well, the Green Party suggesting they could win 4 MPs this time, the SNP with its recent difficulties, Lucy. It's going to be very fascinating to see, in all parts of the UK, how this washes out.
Yeah, difficult for the SNP coming so soon after a period of real turmoil before their new leader, John Swinney's had a chance to sort of bed in. Labour hoping to make huge gains north of the border to help them, achieve that huge swing, that huge clutch of seats they need to win in order to get even a tiny majority, let alone a commanding majority that will allow them to govern and really kind of turn the page on the years of tumult and chaos as they're trying to frame it. So, I think Keir Starmer today had a very kind of canny backdrop, contrasting himself, quite starkly against Sunak, not only in the dry, but against this very traditional wood panel backdrop, as you mentioned, the Union flags, really emphasising this theme of patriotism, because that's one of the main themes he's tried to work towards to rebuild Labour's credibility on, the economy and defence.
What was interesting on that contrast between Sunak and Starmer is Sunak knew what he was going to do and took us by surprise, but it looked like Starmer was better prepared. And Labour had thought it through, how they're going to be, with the flags and the panelling and how he looked and how he sounded, and even having party workers in the room to applaud him. That contrasted with the hecklers and the music. Things can only get better against...
Except later on, of course, he went to an event space near here. You mentioned Dan McCaffrey being chucked out of it, but actually he had supporters there. One wonders if it would have been just better to make the announcement, this evening from a venue with, Tories around him, Lucy.
Well, he's got to play to the kind of a more modern media landscape. You've got bulletins, people kind of, I want to see what's going on in the news at sort of, 5, 6 p.m. and not wait till sort of 10 p.m. So I think he had to kind of stay within the bounds of some convention. But you're right, it was far from ideal circumstances to announce it. And, some of the kind of sketch writers have been having a field day about the soggy announcement, the damp start to the campaign. It wasn't really triggering the starting gun with the sort of projection of strength that I'm sure he and his aides would have wanted.
The umbrella was invented some time ago. It shouldn't be a stranger to him.
The Metro saying Rishi finally names the date, July the 4th. He'd always said second half of the year, but there are some MPs who are not standing down. Tracy Crouch, for example, who found it very emotional because she can't deliver for her constituents what she thought she could do if it was October or, November, as some had suggested.
No, that's right. They all thought they had
a bit longer.
3-4 months to get their affairs in order, also get legislation through Parliament. And they can't now, and so he's cheesed them off, I think is the polite way to do it, but some of them are using rather more earthy language that Ofcom wouldn't allow.
So the deadline's ticking, proroguing next Thursday, correct? Not long to get those bills through. I think there's about 16 of them. What survives in about 30 seconds? Will smoking survive? Post office compensation, what do you think might get through?
Well, I've joined you here at Sky just having come off the terrace in the House of Commons where lots of Tory MPs, including ministers, were having a drink, some commiserating with each other, asking them that question, what legislation will make it through in the 2 days left of Parliament tomorrow and Friday. They think very little. Vaping, the smoking ban, they think that will pass by the wayside.
Yeah, OK, fascinating. Lucy, Kevin, stay there. Lots from you coming up in the next hour as well. We'll take a further dive into some of the inside pages. In the meantime, Prime Minister has rolled the dice, the gamble we saw in the newspapers. There are 42 days, 8 hours and 4 minutes until the country goes to the polls in the general election. Are you ready? Lots more then coming up on the top of the hour, and we'll be discussing the optics of today. Rishi Sunak standing on the steps of number 10 Downing Street behind us in the rain, announcing a general election early for many of his own MPs. The date is July the 4th. Full coverage coming up in just a few moments.